So welcome everybody. This is Charli Wall from my podcast Courage Dear Heart, and today I'm joined by Julie and James from Our Mental Health Rocks. Welcome, guys.
Hi, thanks for inviting us.
Hello.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. I've been wanting to talk to you both for a very long time, so I'm really, really pleased that you're here and I've got you both. So thank you for coming. The question that I always ask everybody, and I start with this, is because my podcast is called Courage Dear Heart, I'd love to know what the word courage means for you, and who would like to start?
Okay, courage. I'm just going to go with what comes up as soon as you said the word, Charli. So courage for me is sticking to what you know, and almost just holding your ground because you know that's true for you. And that can take a bit of courage, especially if, I don't know, if you're going in a different direction to the direction that everybody else is going as well. And it's not with any judgment around others at all. It's not like, hey, you should definitely come this way because I know better. It's just that I know that gut feeling of this is right for me.
Thank
and
you.
Holding that.
Thank you, James. What about you, Julie?
So for me, courage is slightly different. It's taking the step, it's following your intuition and taking the step into the unknown, knowing that even when you step into that unknown, you're still okay. You're still going to be able to navigate whatever comes up in that next step, and the one after that, and the one after that. Courage doesn't have to be jumping out of an aeroplane. Courage doesn't have
Thank
to be...
God.
Courage doesn't... My friend's busy doing lots of skydives at the moment, and I'm like, wow. But courage doesn't have to be in the big things. The courage could be getting up, opening the front door and walking to the gate for somebody.
That's right, yes.
Courage is feeling all the feels and taking the step. That's what courage is to me.
Thank you. I love both of those. And have you always felt like that about courage in your life?
No, not for me.
Tell me what changed, James.
What changed for me was coming across this understanding, coming across how people work. Before, probably would have gone with the majority, probably would have not followed my own instincts just throughout life. And that changed when I came across how we work, and especially when I got in touch with that gut instinct and went, oh my goodness, that is actually a thing that I've seen in the past, but maybe just haven't followed as much. So that's very much when it changed for me.
Thank you. Me too. What about you, Julie?
Again, I'm different. I'm going to be honest.
Great. We love different.
Yeah.
I would say that I've always done things that maybe somebody else would think is courageous, but I wouldn't say I've done them from a place of courage. I've more so done them from a place of not actually spending time thinking about all the things that can go wrong, and I've just done that. I've just followed that instinct. If something's felt right to me, then I wouldn't say I've blindly followed it, but throughout my life, it has kept me pretty much on the right track. Even if it's taken me off track, it's brought me back on that track. And I would say that some of the things that people would say are courageous have just been born out of necessity. And so that for me, with hindsight, I would say it might have taken some courage if I'd stopped to think about it. But most of the time, if something feels right, I go into action before I have time to talk myself out of it. That's what I tend to do. So.
Yeah, no, I really hear that. And actually, as you were talking there, as you were both talking, really, it occurred to me that actually I asked this question to everyone, but I've never really even seen that. Of course, it's just a unique perspective on what's courage for some people. And I am someone that quit my very well paid job in my early 30s with a young son as a single mother and embarked on setting up a business, which some people considered courageous, other people considered mad. So, but yeah, I think things like that, it's a matter of following instinct, which I think I've always actually done. So thank you for sharing those two brilliant examples. So the reason I wanted you two on the podcast is because the number one question I get asked really is, can you help my children, or how can I help my children? And whilst I love talking about this, I thought it would be much more fruitful to go to the people who actually do work with young people and children. And you two own the business called Our Mental Health Rocks, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to tell me a little bit about that and how it got set up?
Mental Health Rocks came about, it was born of frustration, to be honest with you. It was born from a need and a lack of understanding of easy accessible material, and a misconception that our children are broken, that they need fixing, that they need to go through 365.5 different techniques before they're going to be fixed.
Did you work with children before then?
Before, yes, I trained in the Spark program, and the Initiative Spark program with the States, and I've been in schools sharing the principles understanding and this inside out understanding. And it was difficult to get into schools because of all of the different barriers, different red tape. And we did get into schools and the results were great, but it didn't have the impact that we wanted. We wanted to be in lots of schools. So we created the workshop, Our Mental Health Rocks workshop, with a mission of taking it into every single school in the UK for free. That was what we wanted. We set it up as a CIC. And James came on board as one of the first ones I was on board with that. And James just ran with it. James brought his own creativity in, his own energy with it. And just from day one, we just knew James was the perfect fit for this program with us. And hence James is here now, and it's James and I are running it together. And we got into, there was such a need for it. Within the first week, we had 1,200 schools signed up wanting the program.
Wow, that's amazing.
Within a week of putting it out there. In some Facebook groups, I've had a lot of teachers that unfortunately were not allowed in anymore because of promoting. They wouldn't let us in because they had their own programs. But 1,200 schools signed up, and we went into different schools, and then COVID hit, and we had to do a rejig. We had to reassess, and that's what we've done now. We've updated, we've modernized, we've created new ways of sharing, and our mental health, as you now know it, is back with a vengeance.
So can I just take you back, because you mentioned about Spark, and many women in my community and on my mailing list who may be listening to this do not, they've heard me speak about the principles potentially, but when it comes to talking about what I talk about and talking about children, could you talk about the understanding that we all teach from, the inside out understanding, and your kind of, how can I put this? How would you describe this teaching, this way of teaching to children, to a parent who has no idea what the principles are, or the inside out understanding, to offer hope.
James, do you want to take over that one?
Yeah.
I
So
was talk all the way through otherwise.
No, it's fine. So what's different for me, what really stood out for me with when I became a part of this is compared to traditional teaching of the three principles, which when I first came across it was very much, and how it looked to me was, it was very much set words, this is how your experience gets created.
Yeah.
Okay, so thought, feeling, connection, powered by consciousness, and all from this bigger part of mind. And I found that really, really helpful. It got me through anxiety and got me back into my own well-being. And then on this whole path, you know, hanging out with you awesome guys as well, there were times where it didn't make sense. And there were times where I remember kind of finding my feet with coaching, where some of the feedback was almost like I had to almost say it in a certain way sometimes, or I had to use specific words, and I was getting really lost in the words as well. Now, and that was just purely my perception of it, okay, with what I was doing. Not all the time, but just sometimes. And that's where I got really lost with it. And that's where I would find myself, you know, getting ready for my next one-to-one call with the missing link in my hand, like, oh, okay, what's thought again? Right, so that's that. And consciousness, C-O-N-S, conscious, yeah. So that's just how it felt. Very lost in the words, and also losing that connection with the people I was working with as well.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not being myself. There were times when I was just not being myself. You know, you'd probably just see me like thinking about maybe getting a dick in your outfit and just saying I'm going to be dicking on this call. You know, you can relate. But when it came across our mental health rocks, like the curriculum we put together, it was real life. It was bringing real life examples to life in a class full of children so that they totally got it. The workshops, when I first started doing them, did not include the word mind and consciousness at all. You know, it wasn't in the curriculum, and it didn't make sense to bring it into the conversation. So how do we put it across?
Yeah.
I want to say we bring real life into the workshops, and the session plans themselves have got this amazing structure to follow, with the freedom for us to actually use our own examples or just pick up on the room for, like, what are the kids into, what are the teachers into, drawing in, you know, pulling in something that somebody said to relate it to one of the superpowers we talk about, for example, which was so much more on point for me to be able to relate to the audience that I was working with as well. So yeah, we put it into real terms that are relatable. And of course, if consciousness and mind comes up, we may well bring it in, but where it's relative to bring it in is yeah, so I saw it.
Well, because one of the questions that I got sent was from somebody who is a counsellor for young people and has been introduced to this understanding through me, but was like, how do you get this message across to young people? And I think because people go, you know, when you first come across this and you're like, what would you say, Julie?
I would say, well, I'll tell you just how we start off at the workshop, because I think that just is so simple, yet it gets a really powerful message across. And it's not actually part of the workshop, it's just something that just popped into my mind to say one day. And it's just like, you've got a room full of children, and I'll just go, right, before we start, my name's Jules, and I want to know who in this room has had a bit of a grumpiness in them this week. Put your hand up if you have, because I know I have. And then put your hand down. Who's been angry at something this week? Hands up, go down. Who's been angry this week? Hands up, go down. Who's been happy? Who's been excited? And go through different things, and the hands go up and down. And then I say to them, right, who's been in any one of those moods all week, never moved, and is still in it right now? and you might usually get somebody that'll put the hand up, and I go, some of you was something else as well, really. And that just brings it in that, you know what, we're all human, we all have like lots of emotions and feelings that we have. They're all okay, but we get into trouble when we don't know how to deal with them, and we don't know how to talk about them, and we don't know how to communicate them. So what we're going to do now is have an explore to find out what's going on whenever you're in one of those moods. So you know what's going on, so you know you're okay, and so everybody else does as well. That's how we keep it. It's light, it's easy. We don't have to make it hard work. It's not hard to explain this to children because they haven't had the years of adulthood to build all of those layers of reasons and meaning making that, you know, there must be something wrong with them if they feel a certain way. Yeah. And they just get it. They just absolutely get it so quickly and so easily. And just by asking that question in like a 30-second exploration, to get the fears of that, doesn't matter what mood they're in, it's going to pass.
Is that the same for teenagers as well? Do you find?
Oh, yeah. Teenagers are really good. I love working with teenagers because teenagers, especially the ones that might be classed as disengaged or have got numerous labels from people, because they're the ones that make you work a little bit more for it, right? Because they're not just going to like be, hi, nice, how are you doing? They're the ones that are going to make you work for it a little bit. But do you know what? As long as you take a little bit of time to listen, because teenagers want to be heard. As much as they might huff and grumble and not, you know, try and push somebody away at their core, when you hear and connect with a teenager, you've got that connection. I see it time and time and time again. And one thing I say to parents who have got teenagers who might be going through that angsty stage is we can find it difficult at times to like keep a lid on our emotions, to not like overreact or not shout or stay patient at times when we're feeling all the feels, right? And yet innocently we expect our kids to, and when they don't, it's like we take it personally, and we take it that they're doing it to us. And again, we talk about correlation, not causation, and we talk about how something can happen and we can feel a certain way, but it's not just what happens that's actually made us feel a certain way. It's our input that creates that. So that's going off slightly off tangent a little bit.
No, I think that's not for me, because the piece about, and this is what I hear from, say, the women in my community, my child's going through this and it's my fault, or my child's going through this and I don't know what to do, or my child's doing this and she's really annoying me, or whatever, like, you know, so the taking it personally bit, there will be parents listening to this. That's really important, I think, that piece. And it reminded me of your story, which I often try and retell, but you know the story I mean, where you're in that. Could you please tell that story? Because I think that's a brilliant
is
example.
it the roasting story, or is it the Miss on You drugs story?
I don't know, the roasting story, that sounds a bit rude.
No, it's just the full class decided to insult me and roast me, to show that people can say something to you, but I choose whether I take offense to it or not. So that was a different story to the Miss.
Oh, right, well, tell them both. I'm happy that it was the one where they were like, you know, you said, do you do this to everyone? Yes. And I think that was a really important point.
So I'd been working with this group of teenagers, and they were in what's called a PLC, which is a pupil learning centre, and they had been expelled from between 3 and 5 previous schools, and they were all classed as not engaged, at risk. You know, they had a million labels on them, pretty much. And I was going in and working with them and talking to them and exploring with them. And about 4 or 5, maybe 6 weeks in, one day, one of the young men said to me, "Miss, are you on drugs?" I was like, "No, why?" And he went, "Well, Miss," he says, "it doesn't matter what shit we pull." He went, "You never get angry at me." And I was like, "All right, okay." I went, "Why do you think I should get angry at you?" He went, "Miss, we've pulled some shit tonight." And he looked at the like rest of the class, and the class are going, "Well, have like," so they're all just like, because they really had, right? And I said to them, I says, "Okay," I says, "I agree, you have pulled some shit, right? You have really tried. But if it wasn't me standing teaching this class now, and it was just somebody else, would you still be pulling that shit?" He went, "Well, yeah." "Everybody else, would you still be doing the things that you have done?" "Yeah." I went, "Well, then you're not doing it to me, are you? You're just doing it." I said, "So why am I going to get angry at you just doing something? Because it's not, you would do it to somebody else. I don't have to take offense at that. I don't have to take that personally, because you're doing what's making sense in your mind for attention, for to try and get out of a lesson, for a response that looks like is the thing to do." But you do that with anybody, so you're not doing it to me, you're doing it. There's a huge difference. And that took the lesson off to explore that as well. Other lesson was a group of 12-year-olds, and there was 2 girls upset because one of the other girls had been quite mean to her and said some things that weren't very nice. So I thought, right, okay, so let's just change the lesson that we were going to change, that we were going to deliver. And this was a class of about 30 kids. And they all stood up in line and took it in turns to come and insult me. I mean, they absolutely loved it. Some of them had 3 and 4 different goes. I mean, some of the things they came out with were hilarious. Like, this my career, my fingernails longer than your career. And this one young boy, 4 times he kept going to the front, but he couldn't get his words out, and he was just laughing that much, and he had to go to the back of the queue and keep coming back. My hair's like candy floss. I've got loads of wrinkles. They can't understand. I mean, all of the things came out, right? And then at the end, this young boy went, "I'm going to bring my dog to wee on your head." That's what he wanted to say, right? And they all said whatever they wanted to see. And then at the end, I was like, "Oh, that was a good one. Come on, you can do better than that." And we just interacted throughout the lesson with it. And it just goes, again, they were saying something to me. I mean, they were, looking at my hair or my wrinkles or my accent or whatever it was, and saying something about it. But I get to choose whether I take that on personally, or again, whether I see. And especially with the boy that was laughing and couldn't get his words out, that's exactly just what's going on in their head at that moment, right? And if something else is going on in their head at that moment, they're going to have a different reaction. They're going to have a different experience. They're going to say something different. And one thing we always say when we're working with any kid, any child or any teen, is don't focus on the behavior of the teen or the child. I often liken teens to the faces as well as to the parents as just big 2-year-old toddlers, right? And when they are having a tantrum, or being mean or slamming doors or shouting and bawling, they're still having the same frustrations that 2-year-old toddler is having, that wants something and can't explain it, that hasn't got the words to explain it. So always look at the message behind the behavior, not the behavior. You try and treat the behavior, it's going to repeat because you haven't gotten to the source. So take your hand off the wheel. There's always less to do, and come to connect. Because when you just, what, that behavior was a little bit crap, wasn't it? But let's put that aside for now. What's going on? Let's have a talk. And just try not to join their party. If they're having if they're going off on one and having a tantrum party, you don't need, as a parent, you don't need to join that. When you can see that's just them doing it, that energy is going to fizzle out sooner or later. You don't need to join it, and you don't have to even try and do anything about it right there and then. Quite often parents feel like they have to, just stop this. Sometimes we all know it's not the right time to speak to a teen. Let's talk when we're both ready to listen. because otherwise we're just going to be bumping up against each other, and that's not going to help anybody. And I'm going to shut up and let James talk now.
Thank you. I think what I hear, I obviously work in this understanding. I hear hope. I kind of get a feel and a sense for what you're talking about. But there's two questions that came in from sort of concerned parents. One was around suicidal ideation. What would you say, James, to someone who was going through that with their, can the parents contact you for a start? Is that something you offer? But what would you say to a parent who is experiencing that with their teen?
If I'm going to be working with a teen, Charli, then the first thing I always do, because it is usually the parent that reaches, in fact, it's always the parent that reaches out. So the first part of my conversation is always going to be with them, first of all. And with that, it is to really just kind of get to know them. It's not just about, for me, working with the teenager straight away and understanding their world. I want to see what's going on with the parent as well. I want to just kind of find out where they're at, similar to what Julie's kind of talking about. So by doing that, with the experiences I've had with working with the parent, it is about, as Julie says, I don't think we even talk about what's going on with the child for the start of the conversation. It's like, who are you, and what's your child all about when they're not caught up in, whether it is anxiety, whether it is suicidal thoughts, who is that person to you? Because ultimately, and especially with the mums, like for me, the mums are the most connected. They have this huge connection with their child in this form of wisdom. Like they know their child, and they raised this child. They saw, as Julie said, the 2-year-old tantrums, they saw them when they were 2. So I want to kind of explore that and just almost kind of remind them that you've still got that. You are still probably going to be the wisest person in that child's life throughout, because that's very much just what I see with whether it's mums I've worked with, parents I've worked with, or through my own experience, through the programs that I've done with my own anxiety side. Like, guys know stuff. So once we explore that, we explore, like, who is your child before they get caught up in whatever they get caught up in, and what if we could explore that a little bit more with your child? Honestly, when it comes to suicidal ideation, I have no kind of specific answers with that question, other than when it comes in the moment, I'll go with it then. I'll explore it then with them in a way that kind of feels right to explore it with them as well, along with kind of any action I take to be honest and say, okay, I think we need to, maybe I need to reach out to somebody else on this. So it doesn't feel like something I can kind of definitely say, this is what I do.
No, but I really love what you said there about talking to the parent, because if the child's expressing, or the teenager's expressing suicidal ideation, and I know I did as a teenager, actually the parents are the ones that are shit scared.
Yeah,
that's what's happening. And so I think that's really interesting, because from what I hear in the work that I do, it's the parents who are scared. But if you're talking to the parents about the child, whereas I'm talking to the parents about them, you're doing both. I think that can be extraordinarily powerful.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say something right now. I think it's might have disappeared. When anybody shows up in my world looking to find out for some help, support, looking to work with me, whatever it might be as well, I'm straight away curious, because there's something for me about people show up in your life for a reason as well. So regardless of what the outcome of the conversation is, I'm always open to, let's just have a conversation. All right. And then I'll know if I can be of service for you or not. And yeah, whereas before, like early days, if somebody threw a label at me, I'd be like, crikey, I'd better get my Sid Banks book out and do a bit of reading up before we start.
Mind, consciousness.
This thought, when does that fit in? Yeah, but just it's just showing up, listening, communicating, and let's just see what happens and go from there. And
yes.
Yeah, you're right. With working with the parents straight, first of all, you can really kind of see that change in them, because we're almost looking in a very different direction, rather than this is what's going on with my kids, and I'm not going like, oh right, okay, well let's have a really good look at your kid and see exactly what's going on with this, as Julie says, with this kind of experience that they're having right now. It's almost like we put it to one side, not to ignore it, but let's just look, there's much more here. Let's look at this. And that that as well brings some answers up for them, or puts them just in a space of, actually, yeah, I'd like you to work with my child next. So a little more open, and almost just, I don't know, just kind of coming off the call and going back to their child with maybe a different mindset, a different how it looks to how it used to look as well.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly powerful. It has the potential to be, and I'm sure your experience is that it has been.
Yeah.
Can I also add that we have a free sheet working for parents who have children who are self-harming. If they want that, just ask us and we'll give it to you, and then they can have that as well, and how to be with their children if there is any suicide, ideation, or any self-harm or anything like that's going on. And as James says, when we work with the parents, it's when a parent can't say anything because they are just blinded by fear for their child. The first thing we need to do is take their blinkers off. Because remember that these parents have their own wisdom. These parents have their own innate well-being. These parents know when their cup's not overflowing with all of these worry thoughts, that their well-being still inside them, and taking the time to connect with their child, not from a place of fear, but a place of love, that makes a difference as well. So that's the importance of working with the parents.
Yeah.
And know that when we start working with teens, because we have worked with teens. I mean, there was one young girl I've worked with who's just passed her A-levels this past week. And the same young girl had been hospitalized 3 times for attempted suicide just a few years ago. And so no matter how dark the sky might seem for any of your parents, right, there's always hope, and how you are today isn't how it's going to be for the rest of your life. And sometimes when we're in that place, we can't see anything further. We can't even imagine that this is going to stop, and that our child's going to just like get through it, and we can throttle them when they're 30 for putting us through all that. Then it's you remember what I did? It's going to pass, and their child has got their wisdom as well, and they've got their well-being. But if a parent goes to a child and the parent is that wound up so tightly with fear and concern and not sleeping and blaming themselves and looking everywhere frantically for something to do and something to help, that's the energy they're going to take to that child. And if that child's already in that energy, it's just going to be overwhelmed. It's just going to be, we're going to get that explosion of miscommunication. So again, it's for the parents, it's all right when you're communicating with your child, because the energy you bring to any conversation is either going to be matched or it's going to explode. So if you're cold, nice and calm and you're settled down, you stay like that, even though it's quite difficult sometimes, your child's mood will change. They will pass. The current thoughts that they're having will pass. Not saying they won't come back, but they will pass. And then say to the child, okay, so what's going to help you now? What do you need now?
Yes, it's really wonderful. There's only 2 of you in our mental health works, is there?
No, that we've got about 70 people who have joined either the programs, the full coaching programs that we've got, or the ambassador programs to take out into the local community and work in and I work one-to-one. So we've got quite a few people in different areas.
Right, okay. So you're all over the country, and you mentioned the chart there. So obviously this is live in my Facebook group, which you're a member of. Could you put a link on under the talk in the group so I can then add it to the show notes everywhere else? Would that be possible?
Which link, sorry?
The self-harm.
Yes, yeah, I'll give you the sheet. Yeah, I'll just give you that.
Yeah.
People just take that, yes.
And so you go into schools and you work with parents, you work with children, and you do one-to-one with all of that. So it's quite a vast scope you've got.
Yes. Teachers, education departments, healthcare assistants, children.
Brilliant.
We worked with quite a few.
So if anyone is actually interested in working with you, there's possibility to do that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, fab. So I'd love to hear, before we bring it to a close, if it's okay and you don't mind sharing your experience of what life was like before for you before you came across the principles. And you don't have to be like, it doesn't have to be great detail, but just to get a feel for, like, because for me it was chronic anxiety, PTSD, and now I've got jazz hands most days, so that's a pretty big deal for me.
Yeah, you know you've made it when you've got jazz hands most of the day, Charlie. That's for sure. Definitely.
What about you? So, like, there's hope. I always want people to hear hope. Courage comes from the heart, and I think you have to be open to hearing that there's hope, and that's what this understanding brings for me. So what's your story?
So my story, the whole reason I came across this understanding was anxiety for me as well. And so that came about in 2016 when we moved house. So we moved from this 1-bedroom apartment that had taken literally years to sell, to finally get a house, a 3-bed house. We get a garden finally. We'd never had that before, and we're just really, really looking forward to actually getting into the house. And so we move in. We notice, now this is an old house, guys. It's like 1862. So this is like, sometimes I look at it and go, why are you still here? Like, but there were little moments that we hadn't noticed when we viewed it. And my goodness, we viewed it a few times. And actually that was probably from an overthinking kind of point of view for me, which I didn't even see as anxiety at the time. Now I'm talking about it now with you. Of like, it's got to be right, because I don't want to move again, and I want to make sure that we don't end up stuck in something that we can't sell either. So many times, but never noticed the wonky landing. Like if you guys, like, as and when you come round at some point, I'm sure, like, it's like you're on a boat when you first walk on it. And we're cleaning the house, and you look at the ceilings, and they're a little bit wonky as well. It's an old house, it's moved around a little bit, it's got some dance moves, maybe some jazz hands as well, to reshape it. So I didn't notice any of that, and I was a little bit kind of worried at the time, how worried looked back then. I'm not sure if this is a good idea. And a few days in, this house is on a road, and it's in a village that we lived in. We literally stayed in the village and moved to this house because it looked perfect. And I just remember sitting there one day, probably in a bit of a stress state because everything's wonky and I didn't want to vote. But there was just this moment of like, the traffic's a bit loud, James. And it was a thought. Now I see it was a thought literally passing through. Traffic's a bit loud, James. And I noticed that thought. And so I listened some more, and I'm like, crikey, it's a bit loud. But it's the middle of the day. I'm sure, no, it was morning, it was rush hour. I'm sure I'll be fine. I'll go to work, come on, I'll be fine. Came back, it's still loud. We're watching a movie in the evening, it's still loud. I'm like, 9 o'clock, it should be quiet enough soon. I said, it should be quiet enough soon. No. And so that for me was just became like, this is a huge problem. Like, what I thought was going to be this awesome, quiet, perfect house was just suddenly starting to become a bit of a nightmare because I just became obsessed with this noise going past the house. And how it looked back then was 24/7. Like, whenever I was in the house, it was there. And it came to a point where I wanted to leave the house, but I didn't want to leave the house because if I left the house, I had to come back again as well. And almost the point where when I was out the house, you know, the ego part of me was comparing other people's houses, like, oh, this is nice and quiet. Must be nice to live here, mustn't it? You know, I was picking up on traffic noise on TV, you know, dramas, Friends. I never knew that there was so much noise in New York City, and all of a sudden my brain's picking up all this sound. So it just became horrendous.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and just so obsessed with it and trapped. I spent all the time in the kitchen and the back bedroom because they were the quietest rooms, the only rooms I could be in, and couldn't sell it because we'd taken a mortgage. You know, we'd borrowed money to get the deposit, and you just couldn't get out of it. That was it. So that was just how it looked to me, with no sleep and just obsession around it. And after many different techniques, which some were helpful and for a bit, and some just totally weren't, and some medication as well. Why not? Let's give it a whirl. I eventually just came across the 3 principles understanding, which clicked with what was going on. Like, I just heard, if you're having scary thinking, you're having a scary feeling. And I sit back and I'm like, well, that means I'm scared of traffic. I'm not scared. Why would I be scared of traffic? And I was like, oh, I'm not scared of traffic. I'm just having this thinking that's going on. And so that dropped to see it for what it was. Now, underneath all of that, there was this curiosity of, throughout my whole experience, Rachel, my wife, she's totally fine. How come she sleeps and I don't? How come she's not bothered and I am? We're not the only house on this road. How are the neighbours still here? Next door's been here for years. So there was always that curiosity. And every time I was given a technique, I'm like, well, why am I having to do that? But number 22 aren't. Yeah. Why isn't Rachel having to do it? So when it all clicked, I was like, oh my goodness, that's why. It's not the outside. It's not the traffic. It's just an experience I'm having through, and then through the whole exploration, I then saw it for, oh my goodness, it was that thought. It was one thought passing through like every other thought that we have, that it just caught my attention and become this massive whirlwind of just turmoil, and probably the best part of a year, I think, of just kind of suffering with it and trying to find a way out. So
now you're anxiety free and you're still in the house. And
still in the house. And honestly, like, I look back when I tell the story, I'm like, I don't even know how that was a thing, because honestly, guys, it's so quiet. And because the experience has changed, you know, the mind works incredibly well. And
it's amazing. That's a great story.
Yeah. And of course, they still get uneasy. Of course, they still get anxious at times. But what's been so great about moving to this house is understanding what's actually going on. So it just comes and goes, and that's it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Are you okay to share your stuff?
Yeah. So I was very easily one of those disengaged children that I love to work with, hence why I love to work with them. I grew up in a home that basically told me I wasn't wanted, that I didn't belong, that it was my fault. Everything happened, global warming, the works, everything was my fault. And pretty much grew up in a very reactive place. There was self-harming. It wasn't my mother self-harmed, and at 8, 9-year-old I used to be cleaning the blood up from when she used to go and self-harm in the bathroom. So there was just quite a lot of stuff from a very young age that I had to deal with and got on with. And that meant getting into trying to escape when I was 15 into a relationship. So I wasn't in that house, which didn't turn out to be the greatest of relationships. And so it was just like into a different relationship that I was in for 15 years that certainly had its times. And all of that time, I was still living in the belief that I was that person, that everything was my fault. So when I said in the beginning about a lot of the choices that I made, people might have thought were courage, whereas to me, it was just like doing it. It was just still thinking about it. It was coming from that defensive place of living, where I was literally fighting for my right to live, fighting for my right to be heard, for my right to have an opinion. It was just everything until probably I was in my 30s was confirming that shut up, who wants to listen to you, right? And then I come across what we know now, and it's like, oh, don't have to take myself as seriously. I can have that thought. I might have done something for 30 years, but I don't have to do it now, because now I can see what's going on. Or I can still do it because we're all human and we fall into that trap sometimes. But I see it quicker and I can laugh at myself for falling into it again. I'm a lot more kinder and compassionate and gentler with myself. I still call myself a stupid cat sometimes, right? Because we all do. But just actually saying that not only do I work that way, but everybody in my life works the same way as well. So none of it was my fault. You know, if my mother decided to go and self-harm in the bathroom again with a little knife that she used to have, then that wasn't on me. That was her doing what made sense for her to do at that moment in time. So I didn't have to carry any longer all those years of belief that everything was my fault and trying to overcompensate for everything. Even when there was nothing to overcompensate for, I would still be trying to overcompensate. The peacekeeper, the make sure everything's okay person, the do too much person, just still am to a degree sometimes, but there's a different driver behind it now. Now it's because I want to. Now it's because I know the good it's going to do. It's not to try and fix something, because you can't fix something that's not broken. And it just means that you can be a lot more forgiving, not only to yourself, but to others. And you don't need to carry things that aren't yours.
Yeah.
So that's what comes up for me.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, both of you. It's been a real honour to have you here this evening. Is there anything else you feel might be important to add?
If you have any parents who are struggling, we have a program that we actually give to, where we sell to our ambassadors, and it's for those who want to go and work in communities or one-to-ones. But we've created a version of that just for parents, for their own, and we've half the price of that, so it's £97 if somebody does want to go and look at that and work with their own, have their understanding for themselves and their own family. That's not to take it professionally, but just for themselves. Then that's there. Know that no matter what's going on in your life, You're not broken, and nor is your child. They're never broken. They may be disconnected, but they're never broken. And as long as, and the sheet, the self-harming sheet that we've got, it ends with love always wins. And that, if we finish with anything, it's finishing with love always wins, I think. James, and have you got anything you want to add?
I think you ended it perfectly, Jules, actually. Yeah.
Well, that's just given me goosebumps. That is the topic and the title of this podcast. It always comes like, it's always like then I'm like, yes, that's it. Thank you both so much. I know, Julie, you're in the group, so you can add whatever you need to add under the live. I'll keep putting the tags and stuff on Instagram, and this will go everywhere. And I really appreciate your time. I think it's going to be very, very helpful and hopeful for lots of people. So thank you very much
for inviting us.
Thank you, Charli. Yeah, thank you. It's been awesome hanging out with you.
Take care.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.